Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mr. Monster YouTube channel. I am your host, as always, Mr. Monster. Today we are going to be watching a clip from the Joe Rogan Experience. It's a podcast if you haven't heard of it. And it's with Forrest Galante, the famous, I believe, zoologist and environmentalist. He goes around the world finding lost or undiscovered animals and creatures. The one that he's been looking for a very long time is the thylacine. I might do a video on the thylacine in the future because I think it's really cool. But without further ado, let's get into this video.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, bro.
Still alive. You are still alive. This is a truthful title to this book.
That's true. It's ridiculous, but it's true. And it's catchy. That's the whole point.
Dude, I watched your show the other day, the television show. What is the television show?
Mysterious Creatures?
Yes.
The new one? Yeah.
And you were looking for some wolf thing?
The red wolf.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they didn't think it was a red wolf. They thought it was like some mystical
a howler.
beast.
An Ozark howler.
Oh, my goodness. Which, wolves do howl.
Yeah.
So Forrest has had a few TV shows over the years. He's kind of like a media personality. I don't know specifically what. I don't think I've seen any of his TV shows, and so I don't really know what episode or video they're referring to right now. But let's keep going.
No, that was an interesting story. If you look at the timeline from when this cryptid, this howler popped up, it's right when the red wolf was starting to plummet in its numbers. And as soon as wolves plummet, they call to each other, right? They howl.
Ah, that makes sense.
So it's like, oh, we're hearing this thing and the spooky thing that we've seen running around the woods. And it's like, well, yeah, it's wolves trying to find each other. And it happened to also overlap with when moonshining was like a big deal. So they perpetuated the rumor of the howler to keep people out of the woods.
Right.
So it like checked all these boxes to like make up this animal.
Is there any cryptid that you find compelling?
Just I think we talked about it before, the Megatherium, the giant ground sloth in Peru.
Yeah.
That's the only one.
I love the giant ground sloth. I think it's really cool. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant sloth in South America. I think it's South America. I'm fairly certain you just said it was Peru. A lot of people actually believe that it could have survived. When we think, even though we think it's extinct, a lot of people believe that it's still alive. So I think one of the locations they think it might have survived is a sinkhole that has like a little bit of a different ecosystem than the surrounding area, but we'll see if he talks about that next.
Depends what you define as cryptid, right? Like, I'm not a Bigfoot guy or Loch Ness monster, but thylacine could be considered a cryptid, right?
Yeah, because it was a...
I do wonder why Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster get so much hype. I don't know. It feels weird. I understand Bigfoot. It's kind of cultural because like so many Native American tribes had a legend of Bigfoot. But when it comes to like the Loch Ness monster, I don't know. Maybe it's just for tourism's sake, but it seems like not even that interesting, I guess. I don't know. That's just me.
We do have video footage of it, and there's been a bunch of sightings.
Yes, but now...
To be clear, if it was real, it would be really cool. But in general, the Loch Ness monster is kind of like big fish thing.
You have all these Bigfoot-esque people, right? All these sort of tinfoil hat guys who are like, it's here, I've seen it, or whatever. And so it's like started to fade into this cryptid realm. And I still think that in Papua New Guinea, there could be an extant population.
Why in Papua New Guinea?
So they used to range, we got right into this. This is great, by the way. So they used to...
Oh, it sounds like they're talking about the thylacine now. And they're talking about how they might be still alive in Papua New Guinea.
From PNG, from New Guinea, all the way down to Tasmania. And then as people came over, they brought dingoes with them, right? And this was like 4,000 years ago. And then the dingoes outcompeted the thylacine in mainland Australia and, in theory, in Papua New Guinea. But dingoes were never introduced into Tasmania, which is why thylacine occurred for so much longer in Tasmania.
So I think he's about to go into what I've heard him talk about before. He believes that the Tasmanian tigers, aka the thylacine, are still around. But even if they're not, they're trying to genetically engineer at least a similar creature, because it was the apex predator of the area, to try and counteract a lot of the overpopulation that's happening with a lot of other animals since the thylacines' disappearance. When I say they, specific private organization, I don't know who.
However, why in Papua New Guinea is because it's such a dramatic habitat. There's so many like valleys and canyons and things that dingoes just probably couldn't traverse. That would mean that there's...
Oh yeah, and he mentioned it right there. Dingoes kind of outcompeted a lot of the thylacine as well. So if the hunters didn't get to the thylacines that they saw as pests, there's a good chance that the thylacine were outcompeted for the same food by dingoes, because dingoes were more efficient at hunting, especially in groups.
Isolated, unexplored areas that the thylacine, because it had evolved there, could still be thriving without the competition.
And for people who don't know what a thylacine is, it's a Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah. It's a marsupial, wolf, crazy jaw, stripes.
Crazy jaw. Like really wild looking.
180 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool looking animal. Like,
Yeah.
Look at that thing.
So when you talk about, cryptids and blah, 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 I still think that these animals could be out there.
Didn't you go looking for one at one point in time?
Twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
And did you have any sight?
I think as of my video's release, he's planning another trip out to Papua New Guinea, but it's going to cost like a lot of money. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to happen, but I think that's one of Forrest Galante's goals, is to be able to get that going. I think that's really cool. Hopefully he gets to film or bring something with him, like maybe a shotgun film crew to be able to actually film a lot of it.
Or any, at least, amongst the people that you were around, or any credible reports?
No.
Nothing?
Well, reports, yes. I mean, there's a guy named Nick Mooney who is like an incredible, that's Benjamin, the last living thylacine in the zoo in Hobart, Tasmania.
That's so sad. I mean, now we understand conservation a lot better than it was understood before. As we understand the development, or as we understand environments a lot more, and how, different ecosystems are reliant on certain creatures, even if that creature is there for like hunting purposes. It's sad that, our ancestors just didn't quite understand the severity at which killing a lot of these animals would have, like the havoc it would wreak on the environment. I mean,
A guy named Nick Mooney, who's like a state biologist, like renowned naturalist and biologist, who has no reason to make this up or anything, and he swears that he saw one in Tasmania about 25 years.
So I think he's going to go on to talk about how this guy was hesitant to even tell people about his potential sighting of the Tasmanian tiger. I think I might have called it Tasmanian devil earlier, but I meant Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine. And I definitely would understand that. I mean, it's kind of like discovering... it would be like if an actual legitimate scientist who was like a Bigfoot skeptic almost was like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's real, I saw him, but didn't want to tell anybody because he'd be worried. Granted, I think that's much less likely because the thylacine we know to have existed. It's just a matter of, does it exist anymore in nature, or was it completely wiped out? And there are a lot of accounts, I'm sure Forrest is about to go into this now, there are a lot of accounts of thylacine sightings, but only some of them are more reputable. And to be clear, just because someone is reputable doesn't mean they can't make a mistake. I would like to think that they are correct, but I do always hold a small bit of skepticism. Everything that we've seen, all the evidence that we've seen thus far from Forrest, though, has proved that there's a good chance that thylacine are, in fact, still in like Papua New Guinea.
Years ago, and he's like, I know every animal in Tasmania. I am a biologist. I work with Fish and Game or fish, whatever their equivalent is. He's like, why would I make this up? He's like, I didn't even tell anybody for a year or two because I didn't want to be called a kook.
Wow.
And then he came out with it and sort of began this whole thing. But yeah, I mean, definitely some credible sightings.
How would one...
It is sad, though, that we have to be so skeptical. I mean, it would be nice if we could just believe people for the stories that they tell, but so many people are just trying to get famous or trying to get funding or otherwise just want to trick people. So skepticism is necessary, but unfortunately that can also lead to us potentially like losing discoveries and not being able to see something that actually does exist. But
even do a survey of those areas. If you're talking about like rainforests and tropical jungles and just dense wooded areas, how would one even find what's in there?
And for the most part, unexplored too, especially when it comes to PNG and Western Papua. Well, that's the thing. I think that's the barrier to entry, right? Anybody can go to Tasmania, drive down a highway, and be like, "Oh, I looked and I didn't find it," which is basically what I did. But
that's about the extent that I'd be able to do with how little knowledge I have of the environment of places like that, and otherwise lack of survival skills. I'd probably be
to
not
get
very
into
useful.
those places that they could be extant requires helicopter support, refuels, tons of local ground support, like local hunters and tribal people that know the land. And so it's a big, expensive operation to try and get into these places. And then, that's just getting in. Then you'd pepper it with trail cameras. Baited.
So with the trail cameras, that's often, even if they never see a thylacine, they can determine if there is or isn't one in the area, often by if there is dingoes in that area. Like I said, dingoes are a direct competitor to the thylacine as far as competition over food source goes. So because of that direct competition, you are way less likely to see a thylacine if you see a dingo, because the dingo, if they're there, most likely have already outcompeted the thylacine. So,
cameras, you do some scent trailing, some sound calling, all these. I mean, you're a hunter, these techniques.
Well, it's interesting because we know that mountain lions are real, but most people don't ever see a mountain lion.
Right.
And a lot of people...
That is something that is important to remember, that we know mountain lions are real and we don't often see mountain lions, and they're not nearly like even if they're I don't know their status as far as endangerment goes, but when it comes to like thylacine, we know thylacine to be extinct. Like, they no longer exist. That's at least the accepted notion right now. And so could you imagine if there were only like maybe 10 in the entire world in a super remote destination, that only some people might recognize what it is in the first place and not, think it's a dingo or something they've already seen? So that's something to keep in mind.
People that live in like these heavily wooded areas don't see mountain lions.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to find one, and they're everywhere.
They live in our cities.
Yeah, there's a shit ton of them.
Yeah.
So you might get lucky and catch one, but the populations are pretty great in terms of like if you're in Colorado or if you're in Utah, I mean, they have a lot of mountain lions.
Right.
And it's very rare that you see one.
Exactly.
So imagine if there was a very small population of mountain lions or Tasmanian tigers. And, you went looking in a much more wooded area, much more dense environment.
Much larger, too. Huge swaths of unpopulated land. And
so he keeps talking about how it's unpopulated, and you might be like, why does that matter? Well, because sure, there is some element of you can always just go in there and look, but if people are there more frequently, they're more likely to see something. I mean, we probably wouldn't see mountain lions very much if we didn't have cities or large population centers in those areas. They might as well be just kind of fairy tales if we only had, scatterings of people out there. In fact, it's interesting when you look at cryptids versus actual like scientific animal discoveries. Sometimes for long periods of time, it'll be recognized that a certain animal exists. Granted, it's a misidentification most of the time, but it's like, then we realize in the modern day, oh, it was a cryptid, and the reason that they acknowledged it as true is because maybe 4 or 5 people had seen it, but so only 4 or 5 people had ever gone into a certain area in the first place. So like a lot of exploration things, like kind of like seeing leviathans on maps and stuff and giant water beasts. It, like, if enough people said it was there, then it was probably there, even though there's so many other factors to their logic. If somebody said it was there, why would they lie? But I mean, there's also just so many other factors of like madness on ships. People lie. There's also just the elements of misidentification, especially if you're not trained in whatever expertise you would need to identify certain animals. So with all that in mind, it's important to remember that a lot of cryptids that we used to think exist, we kind of now acknowledge don't exist. And the same can go the other way, where we thought something did not exist or no longer existed, or we thought was extinct, and then we found it again.
And if they were intelligent and cryptic like a mountain lion, which they probably were because they were at the top of the food chain, they know and they choose not to be seen. Like P-22, right? The mountain lion that lived in L.A.
We have a big photo of him out here.
The one with the Hollywood sign? Yeah.
It's a great picture.
I just love that photo.
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware that there was a mountain lion that lived in Los Angeles. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, that just goes to show how solitary these solitary hunters can be.
He's dead now.
Yeah, exactly. But
did they kill him? Did they euthanize?
They euthanized him. Yeah.
Something's wrong with him, right?
Why?
He was badly injured.
I think he got hit by a car.
Oh, geez, that's depressing.
Don't quote me on that, but there was some injury. I think it was a car strike, and he was an old cat as well. So yeah.
What do you think of the orang pendek?
I think it's interesting. Have you ever seen that motorcycle video where the guy's on the motorcycle and he sees the little guy run across?
Yeah.
So that's supposed to be orang pendek, right? And
well, let's see if we can find that.
Sure.
That one is weird because
there you go.
So here, is that real?
It's so. And is this a?
This is grainy. Is it just a guy running across the road? I think they're about to talk about the idea that one of our ancestors, which was smaller, often referred to as like hobbit-sized, is somehow still alive, hiding in secret. I think part of the reason that got so pushed forward is because there was a fake documentary put out about how they would still exist. I can't remember what it was called, but it was so silly.
Kid, well, that one looks over embellished. But if you watch the actual video, so this is the video I've seen. I think that we love humanoids. As a species, we love the idea.
Just play the video.
Yeah, we do love the idea of humanoids being out there, but doesn't mean that they are, as I'm sure Forrest is about to explain.
It's all still frames.
All of it?
It's all someone talking about this. It's not the...
The other thing is, to prove that an animal or a creature is still in existence, not even necessarily to prove, but to find evidence that there is that animal in existence, often you need to see, to have a strong inclination that you should go looking for a live one, you have to find bones of it. Now, granted, that's much more difficult in areas like the jungle, places where bones will be scattered or not at all be able to be found. Forrest Galante, I believe, was able to find a photo of a quote-unquote a theoretical thylacine bone of a jaw. That's a really long story, so I'm not going to get into that. But he was not able to see it in person. And so it was also charred and kind of hard to see, so it's potential that he misidentified it. But if it was a thylacine, that would be great evidence for it. But when they go over these human things like this, it's okay, why have we never found remains of a creature like this? Or, a burial site if they're so humanoid. I don't know. I find these ones to be much more far-fetched.
Oh, well, that looks so fake.
Yeah, it does.
That's a still frame of it? But that could just
looks like a guy.
Dude.
Totally.
That
could be a
That's what I'm
crazy
saying.
dude. Yeah.
That doesn't even look that hairy.
But I think...
look at the proportions. Looks like a person. Did they have something to judge it by? I've seen the actual video though, Jamie. See if we can find the actual video because that's not it.
Yeah, this is the same one I've seen.
Yeah.
And I think in relation to the motorcycle and the guy, even though there's some forced perspective, it's tiny.
Yes.
Right? So it looks like a dude, but that would be a 4 foot tall guy.
So here's these guys. They're on this motorcycle racing along.
Was that the one? I felt like it ran across before.
Yeah, that one looks fake.
This one looks fake. I'm
that one looks
certain I saw a different one.
Set.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I find the idea that there are giant sloths and some sort of Bigfoot creature fun. They're fun concepts. I doubt that the giant sloth was able to make it to modern day. If they were able to find a giant sloth carcass or something, that'd be really cool. Recent, I'm saying, that would give me more faith that such a thing does exist. But I think finding a giant sloth is like finding a natural woolly mammoth. I don't think that'll happen. But I do find it fascinating that people are so obsessed with humanoid type creatures. When you look at cryptids in general, it's always like the Wendigo, the Skinwalker, Bigfoot. Like a lot of creatures are human-like. Not to say all of them are. Obviously, you have the Loch Ness monsters and whatever that weird pig thing is from Pennsylvania that, if I remember right, turns into tears, melts into tears if you look at it because it's so ugly. That one's really funny. But I mean, it's important to remember that sometimes stories are just stories, and other times stories are representations of truth. And although they might be muddied representations of truth, they are still representations of truth. But that's going to do it for me today. You guys can draw your own conclusions. If you really like Forrest Galante's stuff, he has a ton of videos that you guys can go watch. He has his own YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. I find his videos immensely entertaining. I think he's a really cool dude. But that is going to do it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, comment, do all that good stuff. And maybe click on another video to watch. I have debunking videos, I have storytelling videos, I got a tier list for classic horror movie monsters. But yeah, if you enjoyed, do all that good stuff. And if you didn't, I thank you for listening this long. But as always, I am Mr. Monster, and I am out.